This time on the Brothers Mysterium.
We're going to tackle one of the most requested topics we get.
It's Captain Howdy.
You know, I make the questions and he does the answers.
And then she becomes possessed by a demon.
You don't really believe in any of that kind of stuff, and yet you're afraid of this board.
Robert Murch.
How are you doing?
How are you doing?
Good.
Man, do we need your help.
People are like, oh, you'll be sorry. My brother and I have always been intrigued by the unexplainable. Like many, we're fascinated with stories of the supernatural, fringe science, and modern-day mysteries.
Though we've seen no first-hand proof of its existence, our minds remain open to the possibility.
Unsatisfied with the so-called evidence on television and the internet, we are choosing to take matters into our own hands and conduct our own interviews and research.
Now we're on a quest to speak with as many people as we can and hear the stories of these events from those who have lived them.
No Hollywood effects or exaggerations, and no hidden agenda. We invite you to listen and decide what and who you believe.
We are the Brothers Mysterium.
Hello and welcome to the Brothers Mysterium. This is Tommy and Eric.
Hey, yo.
We are the Brothers Mysterium. We want to thank everybody for all their support. The show's blowing up. We're doing big things, so please continue to like us on Facebook, facebook.com/the Brothers Mysterium. Rate and review us on whatever podcast provider you use. We are on social media. That's Instagram and Twitter at Mysterium Bros. And you can now get Brothers Mysterium t-shirts at fightgiant.com.
Yeah, and besides Brothers Mysterium shirts, Fight Giant has a bunch of other awesome gear and completely unique designs. Some that revolve around sacred geometry, scientific concepts, some funny ironic designs, and more. So yeah, check them out at fightgiant.com. That's fightgiant.com. But without further delay, Tommy, what do we have going on today?
We're going to tackle one of the most requested topics we get, one of the most controversial paranormal, supernatural items that there is. We're going to do 3 episodes, a little 3-part series on Ouija boards.
All right.
So we reached out to Robert Murch, the chairman of the board at the Talking Board Historical Society. He's the world's foremost collector, historian, and expert on Ouija and Talking Boards. So let's not delay. Let's jump into our conversation with Robert Murch.
The Brothers
Mysterium.
A lot better than we did.
Just a heads up, some of the audio from this interview may be a little difficult to hear. That's because we had a slight technical difficulty while recording the interview. So what we had to do in the long run was have Murch speak through the literal speaker on the speakerphone and record that. So bear with us. That being said, let's get the most important question out of the way.
Is it Ouija or Ouija? Let me ask that first, because it looks like Ouija, but so many people say Ouija.
It was originally Ouija. So when the trademark happened and when the board named itself, it was Ouija, which was pronounced Ouija. What happened is by 1920, when you were playing, people said you were Ouijaing. And then it just became Ouija. And very quickly, the makers, the William Full Company, saw that this was happening, and they basically used that thing, which was, we don't care whether you call it Ouija or Ouija, we call it fun.
When explaining anything, it's best to tackle the brass tacks first. And before we can talk about spirit boards or Ouija boards, it's important to lay the grounds of what spirit communication is.
Why don't we try to get a message from Mary Meredith?
Do what?
We could hold a seance.
You're not serious?
Well, that's how the dead are supposed to communicate with the living.
Although the phrase is pretty self-explanatory, spirit communication is more than just an attempt to make contact with the dead. Believers also claim to have contacted disembodied entities that may exist on other planes or dimensions, be they demons, angels, or something else entirely. Stories of spirit communication go way back. Famous instances include the ancient Greek necromantion, or the famous Witch of Endor from the first book of Samuel in the Hebrew Bible.
Find me a woman who is a medium, so I may go and inquire of her. There is one in Endor, they said.
Spirit communication hits a new height of popularity in the 1900s with the spiritualist movement. Spirit communication can supposedly be carried out through a variety of techniques, some that we've talked about on the show, including mediumship, automatic writing, and the use of other objects, such as, you guessed it, the spirit board or Ouija board. And that leads us to this guy.
Different cultures have different views as to whether spirit communication is something you do for fun. Is it a game? Is it something you play with? It's why the Ouija boards are so controversial.
As we mentioned during the intro, this is Robert Murch, and he knows quite a bit about the mystifying oracle and all of its spooky permutations. So before we find out about the boards themselves, we wanted to know a little bit more about Robert.
I was raised Orthodox Jew, which if anyone sees pictures of me, a tall guy with a shaved head and earrings and has tattoos, isn't really what you think of as Orthodox Jew. But when I was little, that's how I was raised. And anyone who's raised in any Orthodoxy knows that, you're comfortable with the paranormal because it's just part of what you're taught. So, I wasn't afraid of it. We were, again, very religious at the time, so angels, demons, ghosts, all of that's just part of the story. My parents got divorced when I was real little, and my mother and my brother and I moved in with my grandparents, and so my grandmother was this wonderful, crazy lady, and she loved science fiction and horror. So everything my mother said I couldn't watch or do was the first thing that we did when she left.
A trait shared by only the best of grandmas.
Yeah, so, Creature Double Feature, I was raised on all of that real fun stuff.
Welcome to the Creature Double Feature. This afternoon, find out who will be the victor when vicious monsters engage in a fierce and bloody battle in Godzilla's revenge.
And when, in 1986, when Witchboard comes out, I think 1985, it didn't hit our theaters until 1986, and my grandmother took me.
It began at a party. It was only a game.
When someone uses a Ouija alone, like Linda, she's very susceptible to the spirits she contacts. And the wrong spirit will take advantage of this. Pretty soon, all she wants to do is use the board. And once that's done, he's able to possess her.
Witchboard. Don't play it alone.
I was 13 years old, and I went and I was amazed that Kevin Tenney did this brilliant thing, which was to make the Witchboard the center of the movie. So it was the main character.
Right.
And I was just kind of like, wow, that's really cool that people are really scared and upset over, a piece of cardboard and plastic. That's hilarious to me. And, I started kind of looking into it a little bit, but then I went to University of New Hampshire, and in 1992, I went there and I was rooming with 3 other roommates, and they wanted to go to a fraternity. And I knew that if I joined a fraternity, I wouldn't graduate college. So I decided to stay at the dorms, let them rush. But part of their rushing was a treasure hunt. And they needed to find an old Ouija board. I had been antiquing and flea marketing and yard sailing with my dad every weekend my whole life. So I came home, hit a bunch of flea markets and whatever. And when I was done, I realized I had 10 boards, and they were all different. And I thought, well, isn't there only one Ouija board, right? Like, how can there be these totally different things?
Right.
So, I did something that I don't know if any of your listeners are going to know what this is, and it will date me, unfortunately. But I went to a library, which is a physical building that has books inside of it.
Never heard of them.
I know, right? It's a lost place. Like Atlantis.
Yeah, exactly.
I checked in all the different encyclopedias, and every entry for the Ouija board said it came from somewhere else. And I thought, how can that be? How can something that everyone has an experience with, everyone has a story, everyone knows what it is, and if you just put it in front of them, you don't have to tell them directions, they know what to do. How can we not know where it comes from? And that basically set me off into a 2-decade-plus journey to uncover, unravel, and retell the story of the mysterious or the mystifying oracle.
Now, as a youth, I had always assumed that the Ouija board was some kind of medieval device with an evil origin that was found in a spell book and was somehow being recreated in modern day by those with unnatural curiosities. But that assumption is far from the truth. So, naturally, we wanted to know about the real origins of the Ouija board.
Sure. So, Hasbro would very much appreciate me saying that Ouija is a trademark or brand that they currently own.
Buy these classic games today. Hasbro Gaming. Play your game.
And make. And the word Ouija or Ouija has been in the public and as a trademark since 1890. So 125 years, the word Ouija or Ouija has been around. Talking boards go back a little bit earlier. So if Ouija's born in 1890, talking boards, we really see leak out of the spiritualist community. That's basically early ghost hunters in the United States. It kind of leaks out of the spiritualist community in 1886 when an article that says Ohio is greatly agitated by these talking boards, the new planchette, and that gets reprinted all over the world.
For mysterious communication.
Australia, London, Paris, all over the United States, everywhere. Everyone reads about this. And we know they are what we think of as a Ouija board because there were drawings and very detailed explanations as part of it. And what was unique about Ouija is that they marketed it as kind of a toy or game or an amusement and didn't lock it into spirit communication. So as the early talking boards that everyone was making at home and using in spiritualist circles that were clearly invented, made, and used to talk to the dead, Ouija was Charles Kenner's brilliant idea of saying, hey, I don't think we care why it works as long as people buy it.
Right.
And so Ouija was the wonderful marrying of capitalism and mass manufacturing. 1890 was just the perfect time for something like this to happen. It was, after the Civil War, people were dealing with so much death. And I think people forget, we look at things through our own perspective, right? So as a historian, you have to be pretty careful that you don't say, well, we look at Ouija boards as doorways to demons, demonic possession. So that's how it's always been looked at. And there's some truth to that, right? Like there were people in the beginning that didn't like you talking to the dead and that thought they were bad. However, the overwhelming public, Ouija, for most of its life, has enjoyed a pretty fun time. Like today we think Family Fright Night, but back in 1890, 1920, 1940, even 1960, it was Family Fun Night,
right? Which
is hard for us to understand, but it's because something else has happened in our culture, Western culture, which is we're very uncomfortable with death. And when I say we're uncomfortable, I don't mean like someone dies and we all freak out. It's just that we're very divorced from it. We're very far away from it. In 1890, 1886, death was rampant. You had 12 children, 6 of them died. Yeah. And you took pictures of your dead children with your live ones.
In 1800, the global average child mortality rate was 43.3%, which means about 4 out of every 10 children would die in their infancy. So Robert Murch isn't too far off. And yes, as you just heard him say, taking pictures with dead loved ones, or death portraiture as it was called, was a very widespread practice in Victorian times. If you've never seen any of these photos, we'll post them to our social media accounts on our website. Be forewarned, some are pretty creepy, at least from our modern perspective.
And you put that on the wall to remember them. Today, we don't like to get old. We don't want, we have plastic surgery, we dye our hair, we work out, we live longer, we live much healthier lifestyles. We don't let children go to funerals. We distance ourselves from death. Whereas death at one time was just so much a part of our life that it wasn't easy. And it wasn't like, oh, another kid died. No, No one wants to lose someone they love. That will never change. But it happened so often to you that you dealt with it a lot better than we deal with it today. We had a lot more experience with it. And so today, when someone looks at the Ouija board, it has a much creepier feeling to it than it once did. And that's with a little help from Hollywood.
You did say something interesting where you said there's all different types of Ouija boards. Everybody has experiences with them. One thing I wanted to know from you is there a proper procedure? Because I'm finding in my own little research, everybody says, you have to do it at night. You have to light candles. You have to be burning sage to do it. Everybody sort of has their own little specific things to get it to work properly. Is there any set of rules, or are there things that will help Ouija boards have success with contacting? Are there things that will hinder it? Any type of, set of rules that will definitely work, in your opinion?
Well, there has been a set of rules that has kind of grown over time. And, originally the Ouija board was a great day game. So the original instructions said, at least 2 people, man and a woman preferred. Well, the Ouija board broke a lot of Victorian rules, which were, a man and a woman weren't supposed to be alone. They weren't supposed to be touching.
Right.
So you would put it on your lap and your knees would be touching, and then your fingers would be touching as you placed it on the planchette. You would do it at night because it was something to do. So, this was mucho date night. And so, one of the rules that's come out of that, this urban legend, is don't play it alone. 1973, The Exorcist comes out, and we know a little girl plays the Ouija board by herself. And this is in the movie, not the real story.
Right.
I'll show you.
Wait a minute, you need 2.
No, you don't. I do it all the time.
You really don't want me to play, huh?
No, I do. Captain Howdy said no.
Captain who?
Captain Howdy.
Who's Captain Howdy?
I make the questions and he does the answers.
And then she becomes possessed by a demon.
Chris, doctors.
Mother, please! Please, Mother, take it stop! It's burning! It's burning!
Do something, doctor, please help her!
Please, Mother!
So the lesson that America got out of that movie was play by yourself equals demonic possession. And, all of these different urban legends that have grown up, it all helps and hurts depending on the person. So some people say that, they say an opening prayer, they picture themselves surrounded by white light, they burn sage, what works for you probably won't work for someone else. So much of the board is belief. If you don't believe that ghosts exist, guess what? You never see them. And you don't have any experiences. But if you're open to it, then you start to wonder when these strange things happen, what that might be.
Right.
And so if you don't believe the Ouija board works or talks to ghosts, the Ouija board will still work. You just believe you're talking to your subconscious, that it's really you. You just don't know it. Something called ideomotor response is what's going on. But, like I tell everybody else, you find things that make you work. So if setting the mood helps you, because it is hard for some people to get it started, that, doing it at night, lighting candles, doing anything that makes you feel kind of safer or more comfortable, because it's very hard when it starts. Everyone's like, this is, bullshit, this isn't going to work, this is just, someone's pushing it, like one of us is fooling.
Right.
And, all of a sudden it starts to move. And everyone's reaction is to take their hands off. Like, holy crap, it's working. And, that's the beauty of it. And it's what differentiates it from K2 meters, EVP recorders, any other spirit communication tool, because you're very much a part of it. The technology of today has really separated the investigator from the experience. You're in this amazing, haunted, dark, scary place, and everyone's looking down at their equipment.
Right, that's true.
As opposed to like looking around and seeing what they see.
Yeah, it's all thermal cameras and devices now. It's not that human aspect to it.
And with a Ouija board, you sit down and you put your hands on it and you hear it move, you see it move, you feel it move. Like you're using all of your senses.
Right.
And so you're really part of the spirit communication. So, things that make it work better, my advice to people is because if you're not used to using it and it starts to work, everyone's brain, you become incredibly stupid really fast. No one knows what to ask. Like suddenly it's working and they're like, well, what do we ask? And no one knows.
Yeah, they choke.
I tell everyone, ask the lottery numbers. I totally want someone to win. I want them to split it with me. I want to be rich. But it's never happened to me, but it would be a great story if they gave you the lottery numbers. But the truth is, come up with a list, 10 things that you can write down. And then you've got 10 questions to ask. And by then, you're pretty much in the mood and in the swing of things. And ask yes or no questions. They tend to be a lot easier and faster than spelling out. Don't ask like what, in what state were you born? If you were born in Mississippi, that's going to take you forever.
Right, yeah. That's true.
So it's like anything else. It's fun. It's a rite of passage in America for, preteens nowadays. And it's done at slumber parties to, real attempts at spirit communication. But it's like anything else. Think about it. Use your head. If it starts going badly, if it starts telling you horrible things, if there's things you don't like and it's scaring you, guess what? There's a hang up button, just like on your iPhone. It says goodbye right at the bottom, built right into it. So if you want to just disconnect the conversation, slide that planchette over to goodbye and you're done.
Very cool. And good advice as well to kind of be prepared, because as you said, people, as soon as it moves, will freak out, take their hands off, and it's like you don't know what could have happened there. You've made some sort of connection, then you quickly aborted it by panicking and not being ready for it.
Yeah, it's like if you're going to an investigation, you check your equipment, you make sure everything's working, whatever it is you're going to do, you do the same thing. Come up with how you want the session to go. And the other thing that happens is it's not going to work by itself at first. It takes a lot of practice for you to let go enough to let it happen. So for people who really want to get it working, do it with 4 to 5 people at first. It'll work much faster. And then you can peel out some of those people. And the more you use it, the easier and faster and the better it works.
Very cool. Another common thing that I kept finding in my research was Zozo, the demon, spells out Z-O-Z-O, and then starts saying horrible things to people. I'm just kind of curious, what are your thoughts on that infamous demon? And so many people claim to contact it. Is there something to that? Is there really a demonic force known as Zozo, or is it just people screwing with each other? What's your take on Zozo?
Well, Zozo is really interesting because it came up in the really early beginnings of the internet.
If you're not already familiar with Zozo, the short answer is that it's a demonic entity that's often associated with the Ouija board. But in reality, there is way more to it than that. However, we're not going to get too in-depth with Zozo right now, because that's what the next episode is actually all about. And in a few seconds, you'll hear Murch mention a guy by the name of Darren Evans. He'll be our guide into the world of Zozo on the following episode. But anyway.
What's unfortunate about Zozo is it's really hard to tell if the current incarnation of Zozo the demon that comes through the Ouija board did what Charlie did, which was someone had an experience, posted it, and then like wildfire. Now, like Charlie again, I believe was a plant from social media, but
right.
Did it spread the same way? It's hard to tell. There's a great guy named Darren Evans, and he's kind of the Zozoologist. He's had some what he believes are really awful experiences with Zozo, and I actually got to do an episode with the Ghost Adventurers on the Zozo demon because of the research that what I knew, and it was about Darren and his experience because it's so prolific.
And what came through this board has tormented his life. This is a real demon, a real evil spirit. This is Zozo.
Throughout history, many cultures have been plagued by versions of the Zozo demon. In the last decade, there have been multiple reports of spirit boards spelling out the name Zozo. Z-O, 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 back and forth. We know it's going to take more than a cleanse to arm us against what we're about to face. So we ask Robert Murch, the world's foremost expert on spirit boards, to give us more information on the Zozo phenomenon.
Robert Murch.
How are you doing?
How are you doing?
Good.
Man, do we need your help. What is Zozo? Is it a demon?
Some people claim it's a demon. Some people claim it's the spirit. Other people say it's something ancient, that it's a form of Pazuzu. And it's interesting to watch through the decades how it keeps coming back.
Is this real? Are we dealing with something real here that can be conjured through one of these boards?
I think the more people believe in something, the more real it is. And I mean that in a very physical sense. Your thoughts have a physical effect on the world. When I first started researching it, I thought, oh, this is just another story. But it hasn't died. It's just slowly picked up the pace.
So this is happening to other people, not just Darren?
Yes, it is something that a lot of people say they contact, and it's always very nasty.
People often send Robert the boards that have summoned Zozo, afraid to destroy them, but terrified to keep them in their homes.
And, again, it's belief. Like, I think we give the Ouija board an incredible amount of power we don't give to any other spirit communication device, right? Like, we believe that the Ouija board is the portal. Like, it is the thing. People, like, when I have a big table set up of antique boards, they walk far away from it, as if the board is going to do it. But no one after a thing is like, get your K2 meter away from me. Like, that EVP recorder is evil.
Yeah, that's a great point. I never thought of that before, but you're right. Yeah, nobody's afraid of, a camera when you're taking pictures with a flash trying to see a ghost. But as soon as you mention a Ouija board, people, as you said, run across the other side of the room or freak out. So they definitely give it a lot of power.
And that fear, that being inside of you, that preconception or preconceived notion affects the experience you'll have with it. So if you're afraid of them, if you believe that they're really bad or something bad's going to happen, you're likely to have that exact experience. It's just the way as humans our brains work. We're programmed to self-fulfilling prophecy. And so the Ouija board, because it has this, again, partly Hollywood created, partly just urban legend, people telling these stories over and over again. And again, the Ouija board's been around for 125 years in its current form. So that's a lot of generations of stories being passed down. And, we hear a lot of them. We call them Ouija-stitions. Like, I tried to get rid of the Ouija board, we threw it out. When I came home, the Ouija board was back right where I left it.
Right.
Like, we hear all of these things. Again, it doesn't matter if they're real or not. If you believe they're real, they are. Because, your reality is, 9/10 your perception, what you believe.
For sure, yeah. And we found that's true with everything, every topic we've tackled, from mediums to ghost sightings. It's definitely, you believe what you want to believe, and you experience the world through your lens. So it definitely applies to Ouija boards as well.
That's right.
This is sort of ties in what I asked earlier, but does one type of spirit board work better than others? Or I know you said there's all different kinds and different designs, but is there any real difference in how they work, or is it basically all the same principle and they have the same success rate if you quantify that?
Well, I'm sure Hasbro would like it to be that the Ouija board is the best one.
Yeah.
Which to me it always is, because it's the one that has lasted 125 years. So, in Ouija, as it's like brands, there's a couple of people who've made it. So right now, there is, in the United States anyway, we have Hasbro's version, which has a black light in it. We have Winning Moves, which is Ouija Classic, and so it's a throwback to the 90s. And then there was a Supernatural TV show themed board, and they all work great. The one I think calls to me and was the most slippery and worked the best from what I heard was the Winning Moves Classic. So if anyone go on to Amazon, type in Winning Moves Ouija, you'll find it. I found that to be the best working, fastest, most slippery, and it's what you think it looks like. So having said that, there are people who claim that using a homemade board is what works better, like making it themselves, not using one that other people have used.
Right.
Better for them. Then there's other people who are like, no, I want to use the really old one because it's worked so many times that. And then other people, it's all about the designs. in the 1940s, there was an explosion of talking boards because lithograph paper, and just the idea of printing on paper and putting that on top of wood really changed the game for talking boards. They could incorporate all kinds of themes like Egyptian artwork or Indian swamis or genies or, you name it, horoscopes, whatever was big at the time started to creep into these other talking boards.
Now, that raises a question I have. Do they come in different languages?
Yeah, from what we know of today, the talking board really comes out of the United States. In 1886 is when it crosses over. So around that time is when it comes out. But there were other type of talking boards that don't look exactly like what we think of as the talking board. And once it exploded here in the United States, we see it in almost every language. Kokori in Japan. It's leaked and infected everywhere. Everyone has used this. It's such a simple way to have a seance or to try to make spirit communication that it's hard to get away from. It's everywhere now.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is great.
In your travels, have you ever heard of anybody in America using one and suddenly, a spirit is spelling out words in a different language, or does it ever, we're always interested in things that sort of not really prove, but show that it's not just your own subconscious. So has, two kids in wherever, New York City doing it, all of a sudden they're spelling out stuff in Russian, and then they go and Google it and they're like, oh my God, that's a message. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
Oh yeah, I hear lots of stuff. The real question is it true, right? So I've never witnessed that. And I've used the Ouija board, a bazillion times at this point. Every paranormal conference, everyone wants to play it, and I've never seen that. I've heard everything from just like what you see in the movies. The planchette goes flying off the board bursts into flames.
Right.
all of that stuff. I'm a skeptic, so I want to see it, touch it, feel it, hear it. I want to be part of it. Otherwise, it's a little tough. And in the age we live in today, with the ability to edit audio and edit video, it's so hard.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Again, just because I haven't experienced it doesn't make it not true. But at the same time, until I see it and experience it and do it, then I'm skeptical. So
right.
I haven't seen it, but there are cases, like Patience Worth. So there are cases from the 19-teens through the 1920s into the 30s where this woman, Pearl Curran, was supposedly talking to the spirit of Patience Worth, who had lived, hundreds of years before.
The story of Pearl Curran and Patience Worth dates back to 1912, when Pearl was 37 and living in Missouri. Pearl and her friend were using the Ouija board a lot back then, and after many, many uses, Pearl was contacted by the spirit of a lady named Patience Worth, who claimed that she once lived in England during a much, much earlier time period. The biggest claim to come from this incident is that Pearl received a little jumpstart with her literary career thanks to the ghost of Patience Worth.
She wrote amazing prose and poetry and lots of books and volumes of things that were way advanced than the way she wrote.
In November of 1937, Pearl claimed to have had her last communication with Patience Worth, during which Patience told Pearl that she was going to die. Without any prior signs of illness, Pearl died 8 days later of pneumonia.
And so it's amazing what goes into your head. And so the idea behind ideomotor response is your subconscious is basically the shield and filter so that we can focus, pay attention to something, and survive. So in other words, when you walk into the grocery store, technically your brain sees everything. It sees all the colors, it sees all the people, the color of their eyes, their socks, everything they're wearing. Now, you can't process that all at once. Our brains just aren't made that way. So this information goes in, but our conscious mind really takes that stuff apart, and the subconscious just absorbs it. So what happens when you play the Ouija board, scientists believe, is that we're also made of muscles, and our hands move. If you ever hold your hand out, some people's move a little more than others. But these small movements start to move the planchette because you can't really keep your hand that still. And your subconscious, because you want the board to work, starts to push your hand and answer the question. So you don't know it's you, but it is. That's what the scientific community says is happening.
Right.
Now, that unlocks an enormous door because all of this information your entire life has been going back into your brain. And so you don't think, if you had a grandmother who spoke Russian and you were around her when you were little, you'd be surprised what really went inside, just like when they hypnotize people.
Right, yeah, for
really
sure.
See. And so it is really hard to pull apart. And just for any listeners out there, the Ouija board does not definitively prove that spirits or ghosts exist. Nothing has, and nothing does. This is a debate that's been going on since the beginning of humanity, where people conscious brains realize that when you died, you went away. Well, where do you go? And so the Ouija board, though, today is looked at as a game and something for fun and something to pass the time, it really explores a really big issue, probably the biggest issue that humans ask, and that's, why are we here? How did we get here? And what happens to us when we're not here? And, today, we put submarines at the deepest oceans to try to figure out life. We're looking at life on Mars. We just had a probe go past Pluto to see if there's water, if there's the ability for life to exist. All of those things that we're trying to figure out are the same questions that get answered or attempted to be answered at the Ouija board. And so instead of looking outside, we look inside us, and it's a fascinating thing. Again, 125 years, the Ouija board has had an amazing run. I think besides Parcheesi, there is no other game that's been continuously sold, for that long in America.
That's true. And interesting thing, as you were speaking there, it made me realize too that the depths that science and technology go, and I feel like science goes so much farther into getting into space, going to the ocean, as where science doesn't, I don't think, dedicate enough time to exploring what's on the other side, the supernatural, the paranormal. So that's why Ouija boards do come in handy, because it's one of the tools that we do have to do our own exploration, as the scientific community is mostly full of skeptics. I'll generalize. Mm-hmm. And the research and all the money and the funds just isn't there. So it leaves people to experiment on their own.
For people who are listening who are interested, there's actually a study, a few different people have been doing it, but UBS in Canada has been looking at what happens in your brain when you use the Ouija board. And so you can, look online and see what they're doing. They're doing some really fascinating, interesting research. And again, it's not whether ghosts exist, it's just like what's happening.
Right.
So I totally believe that when you play the Ouija board, you're opening a door. It's just, what are you opening the door to? Is it your subconscious? Is it to the other side? Is it unlocking parts of our brain we don't normally use? Who knows? That's the beauty of it. It's called the Mystifying Oracle for a reason. And I don't want to demystify the Mystifying Oracle. I like that it has a mystique.
Oh, yeah.
Fun. And that's why I have so much fun being able to consult on TV shows or movies. I got to work on the first Ouija movie, so that was a lot of fun. And it's that movie that some people didn't like. They thought, it was a cheesy teenager movie. Well, you know what? Like, here's just the cold hard facts, and it was really cool. I was invited and got to go to the Blu-ray DVD release and kind of help host that party when the movie came out. And just before I went to do my introduction to the people who came to the party, the numbers came in. And so just before the DVD and Blu-ray were released, the movie almost hit $100 million.
Oh, wow.
Now, that's pretty big anyway. $100 million is a lot. But consider this. The movie only cost $5 million to make. That was a $95 million profit off of a movie that people were panning. And the truth is, people went and saw it in droves. Because they all have this Ouija experience. Like they've all heard it. Oh, my grandmother used to tell me about it. Oh, I used to play it with my grandmother. And so to me, I loved the movie because it brought a whole new generation to the board. And I'd often wondered what was going to happen in today's world of tap, click, swipe, tablets, iPhones. Where does the Ouija board fall? And the movie proved it falls exactly where it always has, which is in the hands of people who are going to try to make contact.
So it's kind of cool that you are admittedly a healthy skeptic, which makes me want to ask you, what's the most intense experience you've had with the board personally?
I played it many, many times. And one time, a couple of years ago, with a bunch of people, it was at the Tilly House in we were in Gettysburg.
Just like a lot of the other structures that existed during the Battle of Gettysburg, the Tilly House has been one of those preferred hangouts for Civil War ghosts since 1863.
So it was at the Tilly House that we were using Ouija boards, and I think it was like 3 to 4 hours that the sessions just went on and on and on. And it was really working, and some people did some research and found out some of the things that it said were like right on. Again, I would say you have to be a skeptic because our brains as humans are meant to connect dots, to keep us out of trouble and to see patterns.
Right.
So we want to believe that they work. We want these stories to be true. And so it's like, why do people fall for or believe anything that they can't see or prove? Believing in ghosts is no different than going to church and believing in God, right? Like what's proved to one person is just faith to another.
Right, absolutely.
Like what they see is proof. And so I've had lots of really weird experiences where I'm like, wow, how could it know this? But then again, the brain is an amazing, weird, misunderstood, and yet to be understood thing that we don't really know how much power is there behind it. And so, it's tough to know. My best experiences have been the last 20 years, which is working with all the different people and collaborating and, like I said, going from the Smithsonian, who now is very interested in kind of the Ouija board and its reflection of pop culture, to Room Word magazine just did a great article, so your listeners should go out and get that. It's like a 12-page spread on the 125th anniversary of the Ouija board. It's just so, excuse the pun, the Ouija board is very alive today.
Right.
And, I just think it's great. So my best experiences are the fact that this tool that's 125 years old and the talking boards besides that go back further are still around, and that I've had a fun, awesome, really cool life because of them.
And that kind of leads into, I had another question for you, which was, what do you think is the future of the board? I mean, will it always stay the board, the planchette, or will it become, as you said, some online thing where you can go to a chat room and ask questions and, get answers from the other side they claim? What do you think is the future of it?
I think, the future has a great for it. I don't think it's ever going to go away. I think as long as people are dying, it has a place. So as long as people lose someone that they love and, have unresolved issues, I mean, think of how many times it happens more as we get older, right? So, as I'm in my 40s, I see this more and more, that people's parents are passing away, tragic accidents, people didn't get to say goodbye. Maybe the last thing that happened, they got into a fight, so they never got to say they were sorry or they were kidding or whatever.
Right.
So those things happen, and then they want to make contact. So as long as people die, we will have this need that the Ouija board fulfills.
What would you say to those people that are deathly afraid of the boards, don't want them in their house, never want to look at them? What would you tell those people if you had the chance to speak with them?
I would tell them that they should send their boards to me so that I can. I and a bunch of other people founded the Talking Board Historical Society. So if you look up Talking Board Historical Society or go to tbhs.org, you can go and learn all about us and what we do. But we take a lot of donations. And so if you want to get rid of your board, and I don't burn it, not because I think it's going to release some demon, but because I just don't want to see it get burned. We're like the ASPCA for Ouija boards. So you can cue Sarah McLachlan singing The Arms of an Angel. And I'm going to say, like, please, send us your boards. And honestly, we find homes for them. Sometimes the stories that come with them are just awesome and amazing. And, I try to keep the stories with each board. And we record them. And then other times, we find the perfect place for them. So for people who are afraid of them, that's okay. It's like anything else. If it scares you and it bothers you and it's making you crazy, just stop it. Like everything else, just stop. Don't play. It doesn't matter what your friends think. Who cares if it makes you feel uncomfortable? For people who are scared but still want to play, pick your friends that you trust and do it. Don't do it in a graveyard. Like, think about what you're doing, right? So even though I think it's silly that people are nervous of graveyards, like, the person didn't die there, they just happen to be buried there. So
right.
I always think it's funny that people are scared of graveyards. As far as hauntings go, like, I doubt anyone haunts a graveyard unless they died in the graveyard, maybe. But I don't know. But don't do it in a place that's scary to you. Do it in a place that you feel pretty safe. And again, ask safe questions. My favorite thing happened. It reminded me, we hosted WouijaCon. So we celebrated the 125th anniversary in Baltimore, where the Ouija board got its name earlier this year. And some girls came up to me, and it reminded me of something that happened many years before. And they asked, it was the same conversation. And it was, these girls said, oh my God, we were playing the Ouija board, and the Ouija board started saying terrible things, and it scared the crap out of us, and it was terrifying. It was horrible. And I'm thinking, wow, well, I want to hear the story. What's going on? What happened? And they start to tell me, they're like, well, we were using the Ouija board, and suddenly the Ouija board started to tell us, like, how and when we were going to die. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty specific.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, what were you asking the Ouija board when it told you this? And they looked at each other and they said, well, we asked the Ouija board how and when we were going to die. And so I started laughing. And I'm like, maybe those are not the questions that you should be asking if that's going to bother you. Again, go for the lottery numbers.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Try to get something back. Yeah, for sure. Awesome. That pretty much wraps it up on my end. Do you have anything you want to mention as far as Facebook page, Twitter handles, anything like that, websites?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're interested to see what I'm doing and what adventure I'm going on, you can go to Robert Murch, MURCH.com. I have a public page on Facebook, so look that up. It's Robert Murch public page. You can't miss it because that's what it says. Twitter, everything is at Talking Boards. So if you go to Facebook.com/Talking Boards with an S at the end. On Instagram, I'm at Talking Boards. Twitter, at Talking Boards. And if you want to learn about the Talking Board Historical Society and all the amazing people who are part of it, that's tbhs.org. And look up them on Facebook and Twitter. They also have stuff for them too. So you can find out all the cool things in the world of Ouija.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for taking the time. I'm glad we were finally able to connect and make this happen, and we appreciate having you on our show. You're definitely the expert, the man we wanted to talk to, so we're glad we got you.
Thank you so much for having me, and again, thanks for the patience. I appreciate you guys hanging in there.
You got it, no problem.
The Brothers Mysterium.
So that was Robert Murch. I want to thank him for taking the time. He's an awesome guest. He definitely knows his stuff. Very smart guy, very well-spoken. One thing I'll say, I thought his the thoughts and background he mentioned about the Charlie challenge were very cool. He made a great point that like no one was scared to do it. It was people of all ages, all cultures. They're out there. They're having fun. They were filming themselves. It was a huge fad for a while.
Right.
Which, of course, raises these questions. If pencils work, why not a planchet? Why couldn't automatic writing work?
Pretty much why can't any object
be
made into a spirit communication device?
And that's something that I always wonder. There are a lot of people that'll say, you need this planchet. It's got to be this kind. You can't do a homemade one. You can't do this. You can't do that. I asked Murch about, are there rules? And it's kind of like anybody can do anything. It's sort of open reign. People say like, well, the Ouija board that you buy from Parker Brothers isn't as good as if you got to get an old classic one or you can make one or whatever. But I feel like at the end of the day, if a spirit wants to reach out to you, they will find a way, especially if you're inviting them.
Yeah, he kind of said, like, almost in a way, like, whatever your rules are, those are the rules. You know?
Yeah, and he obviously knew a ton about the history. I thought it was cool that it's actually Ouija, not Ouija, and he talked about sort of the evolution, which was, he educated me for sure, and it was funny how it started out as a fun toy, and then later became kind of the spirit communication device and very taboo and evil, but its origins are that of like, grab your pals, gather around, and
talk to dead grandma.
Right. And then later it became a thing where now even tons of people who I talk to will say, like, don't mess with the Ouija board, man.
Yeah.
It's going to get you. You're going to be sorry. I'm always like, oh, no, what happened to you? And they're like, nothing. I don't have them. I never keep them in my house. And,
right.
Which annoys me because it's like, well, why are you so afraid of something that you have no experience with? It's sort of like the more you fear something, the more power you give it. So it annoys me that so many people, and just this arrogance where they're like, you know, I've told them, like, we're going to have to try it for the show, and I've done it before. Yeah. People are like, oh, you'll be sorry. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, regardless if it worked or didn't work, it's just, you know, it's like,
right.
Chill out.
Yeah, there's times where I'm very surprised at the kind of people who say to me, like, oh, I don't mess with Ouija, man. I don't do that. And it's like, you don't really believe in any of that kind of stuff, and yet you're afraid of this board. The other thing is, like you said, when I tell people I've done Ouija experiments in the past, and I've always tried to like up the ante, see how much further we can take it in terms of like where I'm doing it, how famous is the location, is it nighttime, is it like this, and people act as if I'm saying, like, sometimes I like to drive my car blindfolded on the highway.
Yeah,
you're crazy, man. You're crazy.
Yeah, it definitely is a hot topic issue, and for some reason, like you said, I think if we said, like, you know, we're going to go and disturb this dead person and try to wake their spirit, people would be like, oh, cool. But then if we say, oh, we have a Ouija board, they'd be like, get the hell out of my house with that. What are you, out of your mind?
Right.
So it's interesting that it gets such a volatile reaction from people.
Right. Or yeah, you could say like, oh, I'm going to try automatic writing. And they'd be like, this idiot, he believes anything. And then you're like, and then I'm going to play with my Ouija board. Whoa, you crossed the line.
Murch had a great line where he said, so much of the board is belief, which I think ties into exactly what we're discussing now.
For sure.
And it was just so cool just to get so many answers to a lot of questions. He really helped separate the history and the facts from the legend and the lore, which is why it's always good to have a well-informed guest. I liked when he said it went from family fun night to family fright night.
Yeah, that was very well said.
So that was cool. The Zozo, the demon stuff was cool. And
which that was all new to me. I mean, I've seen the name Zozo and like there's the Led Zeppelin connection. We'll get into all that stuff next time.
In the next episode. Of course, when Murch tells you something, you follow up. So we actually did reach out to Darren Evans, who was the man he mentioned was sort of a Zozo expert, a demonologist of sorts. So we did reach out to Darren Evans. He was cool enough to come on the show, so that's going to be the next episode. But like Murch said, just some more great quotes. He said, if you believe it's real to you. And I think that kind of ties into the idea of like truth doesn't depend on your belief in it.
True. But at the same time, it goes the other way, which is, well, I mean, I guess that quote goes both ways, because if something is false and you believe in it, it doesn't make it true. And if something's true and you don't believe in it, it doesn't make it false. But he was kind of on the fence the whole time, which is, I definitely like his outlook and I like the way he approaches it, and he had all the great history and all that. But there comes a certain point where you're like, come on, man, 100% real? Not real.
Yeah. I mean, I think he is sort of keeping that healthy skepticism, that balance. I appreciate that he didn't lie. He very easily could have said,
right,
the board burst into flames or the planchette flew out and got stuck in the wall.
Sure. He hints at the fact that he doesn't think it, that most of the belief is just in people's minds.
Right. Well, and I think he even openly, honestly embraced the fact that the debate will rage on forever. Is it real? Is it not real? The interest is always there. Is it your subconscious that is doing it? Is it not? And I think, he seemed to be more into even just the mystery and the intrigue of that whole aspect, more so than wanting to state it is real, it does work, or it does not work, which we can agree with, because like we do sometimes with our show, people get mad at us because after an episode, we might not say, in conclusion, Ouija boards, fake. Or in conclusion, Ouija boards, 100% real, will always get you a ghost. So I like that he was not only smart and well-educated, but he did have that healthy skepticism. He didn't lean too much in either direction. He was kind of a fair, balanced expert. If he just kept saying it's so real and it does all this, it does all that,
right,
it would have made me doubt him. On the other side, if he was like, nah, it doesn't work, it's this and that.
Well, then you would have asked the question of why has he dedicated his whole life to this thing if he's like, nah, it's bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
So he must be continuing the research, which obviously I can respect that.
Yeah, and we respect him. We want to thank him again, Robert Murch. Great guy, great guest. It made for a great episode.
Audio clips heard in this episode are from 1944's The Uninvited, currently in the public domain. The Exorcist, released in 1973, produced by Hoya Productions and distributed by Warner Bros. The Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures, episode 115, entitled Zozo Demon. Songs in this episode include Angel from Sarah McLachlan's 1997 album Surfacing, released on Arista Records, and Death and Transfiguration by Richard Strauss. If you want to get in touch with us, you can do so by emailing thebrothersmysterium@gmail.com or going to thebrothersmysterium.com. Social media sites include @MysteriumBros for Instagram and Twitter and youtube.com/thebrothersmysterium. If you get a chance, please rate and review us on whatever podcast provider you prefer. There's some good alliteration. And as always, we want to thank you for listening to us. We'll catch you next time.